All right, guys, we're talking about women's suffrage and the first feminist movement. Suffrage means the right to vote. So if we talked about dog suffrage, we would talk about dogs having the right to vote or fighting for the right to vote. A feminist is someone that believes that men and women should be treated equal legally, culturally, and every shape and form. Now, these movements are going to fight for a couple of things. They're going to fight. First one's going to fight for suffrage, the right to vote, ownership of property, the legal rights, equality to be treated as the same as men, and of course, education is just critical. Because if you're ignorant, which means you have a lack of knowledge, then somebody could control you. As we know from the past, that one of the worst things a white person could do to a slave was teach them how to read or write. Then they wouldn't be ignorant. And if you're not ignorant or you're educated, you don't need Mr. Metropolis to teach you American history. You could read and write on your own. Well, let's get a couple of facts, just kind of see where women are today, and if feminism is, which is actually still alive and real, and a lot of people are feminists. Let me find out why. Well, just a quick facts, and we're looking at America and the world today. In the world today, there are still more women in America are paid make about 78 cents on average to men to every dollar a man makes. So if you took all the women in America and you divided them up, you found the average, you'd find that they make about 78 cents of what the men make, which is a dollar. Which is interesting because more women go to college today than ever, and actually a pretty good chunk of more women than men go to college in general. When I went to college, my college was at 70% female and only 30% male, and that's tends to be a trend all across America. A couple other interesting facts: women still cannot vote in a lot of countries in the world today, especially in Africa and Asia. While men might vote in the country, women can't. Women do not have equal rights across the world. Women cannot even drive in Saudi Arabia. Many other Mideastern countries and North African countries, women can't go in public without a man, usually their husband, and several other things. So we're going to look at what they fought for in America and look at through that context and look at what they were fighting for then. Let's start off and look at how the women were dressed back then. We could see that they are covered from head to toe. The dress goes almost all the way down to their toes, and it covers their wrists and even their neck. And they would wear a hat. Women would wear a hat when they go in, especially in public or church, because you're expected to be covered. Still today, if you could go to many churches, it's acceptable in our American culture for women to wear hats, while if a male or myself would pull out a hat, it would be seen as disrespectful. And that's where that comes from, that women would cover their heads to be respectful. And while there is a lot of difference between men and females, like the way we're built, for example, men are built for power. Like in football, we explode, we have a lot of power, but then we get tired quicker. Where women are built more for endurance or long range, we are very much equal in the way we think and act. There is some differences between the brain and psychology. You'll find out that women tend to be a little bit more emotional because maybe that part of the brain was a little bit more developed. And some people like to argue that women are smarter because of this. I don't know what your point of view is. So what we're going to see to start off with is a famous actress from Dreamgirls who's going to recreate probably one of the most famous speeches for women's rights by a African American former slave, and she was a minister at the time, named Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth is just absolutely fascinating. She was a civil rights leader and abolitionist fighting against slavery. And she never knew how to read and write. In fact, you could read her autobiography, which is a book written by herself, except it's actually not written by her hand. She had to have somebody else write it for her. It's a great story. She had 13 children, and she did quite amazing things in her life to spread the word on women's equal rights and abolishing slavery. Take a minute to watch this and enjoy, but pay attention to what she's saying.
Here, the black abolitionist Sojourner Truth, who was freed from slavery in 1827, speaks to a gathering of feminists in Akron, Ohio in 1851.
Well, cheering. Well, there is so much racket there must be something out of kilter. I think twixt the Negroes of the South and the women of the North, all talking about rights, the white man will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helped me in a carriage or over a mud puddle or gives me the best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted. I can work as much. No man can head me. I gathered in the barns. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I get it. And bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have bored 13 children and seen most of them sold off to slavery. And when I cried out in my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? When they talk about this thing, what's that thing in the head? What they call it? Intellect. That's it, honey. What that got to do with a woman's rights, a Negro's rights? If my little cup won't hold but a pint and yours hold a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then, that man there, that night that little man in black there, he said, women can't have rights as much as men, 'cause Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man ain't had nothing to do with it. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back right side up again. And now they is asking to do it. The men better let them.
So that was Sojourner Truth. That's Ain't I a Woman? Amazing speech. She actually addresses a real argument at the time was that Jesus was a man. That's why men should have equal or have more rights than women. All right, so we were reading and analyzing in class the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions, which was written by Elizabeth Cady Stanton in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York. There's a meeting about women's rights, and Susan B. Anthony became friends with her, and actually they worked together over the years, created a National Women's Party, and they had several things they wanted to accomplish, several goals. Now, a sentiment is an emotion or a feeling. So if I said, when people say they're sentimental about something, like if I said, I'm really sentimental about the lunchbox my wife gave me for Christmas, it's got my name on it, it means a lot to me. It means I have an emotional connection with it. I feel strongly about it. Your sentiments are your feelings or your emotions. Now, a resolution, as my Model United Nations team members will know, is when you actually sit there and write down a way of solving a problem. The root word solving, solution, and this is what we could do. So they demand equal rights for legal rights for women. That's what they want. Their feeling and how they feel about this and why. And they want education and job opportunities. Education, as you know, is just so important. Once women are not ignorant and they're educated, then they can start thinking and representing themselves in government and across all institutions like schools, the military, and so on. They could do some low-level education jobs like teaching in terms of like lower grades, but they couldn't be a college professor. They couldn't even be a high school professor, but secondary education would have been too high up. What other jobs do women do? Well, they would work at factories like the low mill girls, we know, the young ladies work at factories. They would be a lot of housekeepers. They live as maids in wealthy people's homes. And they would take care of children and stay at home. They also wanted legal rights to protect themselves and their bodies. When a woman married a man, you lost all your rights in the sense that the man almost became your completely in charge of you and like almost a master like role where he could pretty much do what he wants to you, and this causes some issues, and that's why a lot of women will have 20 or 13 children. And what he are and women did not always want to have all these children, but men had a legal right to make their wife have children with them whenever they wanted. Um, some other conflicts that are going to happen outside just the children is going to be there's going to be abuse. A man could abuse or physically hurt his wife, and there was no way of protecting herself. So property rights are a big issue. You could be married to a man for 30 years, but you can't own the property. So you could raise the chickens on this farm and take care of the cows, and your husband passed away, and believe it or not, it would be the oldest son who gets the property, or even his brother or father. Now, they called it the Declaration of Sentiments to mirror the idea of the Declaration of Independence. In fact, they liked some of the great ideas in the Declaration of Independence, but they also are very sharp, and they kind of take the founding fathers' ideas and they flip it back at the men who were in leadership at the time. Because one of the most famous lines in the Declaration of Independence is, "All men are created equal." So, of course, in Declaration of Sentiments it says, "All men and women are created equal." So you can see just want to point out a couple things in the picture. On the left, you have Susan B. Anthony. She's kind of standing over Elizabeth Cady Stanton. They really did become great friends. And the woman sitting now is Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the author of the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions. They send this to government. Unfortunately, they did not get what they want, but this is the first time really anybody had asked for a right to vote for women and fought for women's rights. Some say that John Adams, the second president of the United States, was kind of considered the founder. The first woman, she says, "Remember the ladies, John," when she's talking about the Constitution and the government. All right, now we're going